Hello everyone, welcome to CashcroftTV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. Today we will be covering the Pushyabhuti Dynasty, also known as the Harsha Empire, and we will cover a specific leader from each empire. So for the Pushyabhuti Dynasty, we will cover Harsha, hence the name, the Harsha Empire often. As well, we will pair that empire with the Rashidun Caliphate and Abu Bakr. So this Rashidun Caliphate is one of the first Islamic caliphates. So it's also one of the largest empires, maybe even the largest empire we've covered so far. So very important empire. Both of these are, however. So in the style of the episode, we will cover an empire, then a significant leader from that empire, then we will cover the second empire, the second significant leader, and then we'll, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, where he pairs Greek and Roman leaders and then contrasts them at the end, we will have a comparison between Harsha and Abu Bakr at the end to learn a little bit more about their respective empires and perhaps a little bit more about the two individuals as well. I also have the philosophy that we learn more about why people are different rather than why they are similar, because there's the Anna Karenina principle that goes somewhat like this, that all functional families are alike and all different dysfunctional families are different for different reasons. So maybe by learning how Harsha and Abu Bakr are different, we might learn how they're most unique, in fact. So without further ado, we will start with the first empire. So the Pushyabhuti dynasties. The Pushyabhuti dynasty, also known as the Vardhana dynasty, was a ruling dynasty in northern India during the 6th and 7th centuries CE, that's Common Era. The dynasty reached its zenith under its last ruler, Harsha Vardhana, who was also likely their most significant leader as well, hence often it is even called the Empire of Harsha, who lived from approximately 590 to 647 CE, that's Common Era once again. And the Empire of Harsha covered much of north and northwestern India, extending till Kamarupa in the east and the Narmada River in the south. The dynasty initially ruled from Stanveshvara in modern-day Kurukshetra district in Haryana, but Harsha eventually made it to Kanyakubja, modern-day Kannauj, in Uttar Pradesh, his capital, from where he ruled until 647 CE. So that's a lot of locations, and my apologies for the pronunciation. I'm not a native speaker, but nonetheless I'm trying my best, reading mostly phonetically, and also perhaps for the captions, you can maybe by reading it phonetically you might be able to find it and perhaps look up the names on your own as well. But whenever possible, I'll endeavor to pronounce it as best as possible. And these regions will make more sense as when we get into the specific history. So some modern books describe the dynasty of Vardhana because the names of its kings end with the suffix Vardhana, such as Harsha, Vardhana. However, this may be misleading, as the names of the kings of other dynasties also end with this suffix. So the Vardhana suffix is not necessarily unique to the Pushyabhuti dynasty. So, as for the rise and fall, so the Pushyabhuti dynasty was the ruling dynasty in northern India, with its most notable figure being Harsha Vardhana. Therefore, we seek to find a history of its rise and fall in the style of perhaps Shearer's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, or maybe less directly, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbon. So, starting with the rise of the Pushyabhuti dynasty, circa the 6th century CE. So as for its early origins, the Pushyabhuti dynasty had its origins in the region of Thanesar, located in present-day Haryana, India. The exact details of its early history, however, and the founder of the dynasty are not well documented, unfortunately. But as for the consolidation of power that soon came after, the dynasty began to consolidate its power in the 6th century CE, establishing itself as a significant political force in the region. As for Harsha Vardhana and the zenith of the dynasty from 590 to 647 CE. So Harsha's ascension. Harsha Vardhana, born in 590 CE, was a member of the Pushyabhuti dynasty, so part of the royal family. He ascended to the throne of Thanesar in 606 CE after the assassination of his brother Rajyavardhana, with the same, as we can see, suffix, same royal family as his brother. As for his military campaigns, under Harsha's leadership, the dynasty engaged in military campaigns to expand its territorial influence. Furthermore, the conquest included regions in present-day Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. As for the cultural and religious patronage during this zenith period, Harsha was a key patron of Buddhism and played a significant role in promoting religion across his empire. His support extended to the organization of the Grand Buddhist Assembly in Kannauj in 643 CE. So a lot of these previous Indian empires that we've covered have promoted Buddhism. So maybe no empire necessarily individually was responsible for the spread of Buddhism, but all of them contributed significantly. And the Pushyabhuti Dynasty did contribute significantly to the spread of Buddhism. As for cultural and religious, for diplomacy and alliances, Harsha was known for his diplomatic skills, forging alliances and maintaining peaceful relations with neighboring states. So not only a great conqueror, but also good in sort of maybe those he could not conquer, good at establishing strong relations or diplomacy. This diplomatic acumen contributed to the stability of the Pushyabhuti dynasty. As for the decline, however, the turning point, so hence after the zenith, it necessarily starts to fall. Start from 647 CE onwards. Harsha's death and succession issues. So Harsha died in 647 CE, marking the end of the Harsha dynasty, or the Pushyabhuti dynasty even further, without leaving a clear heir to the throne. The absence of a strong successor led to internal conflicts and power struggles within the dynasty. So almost all the empires we covered have had internal problems leading to its decline. Furthermore, as almost always, there are also external factors, such as external invasions that the Pushyabhutis were subjected to after the fall of Harsha. The weakened dynasty faced external threats, including invasions by the Chalukya dynasty from the south and the Arab invaders to the northwest. These invasions further destabilized the Pushyabhuti dynasty. As for fragmentation and decline, further, the internal strife, coupled with external pressures, as mentioned, led to the fragmentation of the dynasty. Various regions under the Pushyabhuti rule started to break away and smaller independent states emerged. So almost all the empires we've also covered after the decline leads to a sort of defragmentation into smaller states. And in their formation, it's usually the amalgamation of smaller states as well, so sort of inverse. So thus, after this period, after 647, it officially ended and sort of fragmented into different states after the culmination of both internal pressure from lack of a clear heir, but also external forces. But as for the legacy of the Pushyabhuti dynasty, despite the decline of the dynasty, Harsha's contributions to Indian culture and Buddhism left a lasting impact on the region and across the globe. The Pushyabhuti dynasty legacy is closely tied to Harsha's rule and cultural and religious developments that occurred during his time. So although we don't know who necessarily was the first of the Pushyabhuti dynasty, perhaps it was Pushyabhuti himself, but or someone else, but it's not exactly known and it's not well documented. There is clear evidence of the abilities and skills of Harsha. So thus, the rise and fall of the Pushyabhuti dynasty marked the ascendancy up to power in northern India, with Harsha Vardhana being a pivotal figure. The dynasty's zenith saw territorial expansion, cultural flourishing, and diplomatic success, and also the rise of Buddhism. The dynasty's zenith saw territorial expansion, cultural flourishing, and diplomatic success. However, following Harsha's death, internal conflicts, external invasions, and the lack of a strong successor led to the decline and ultimate fragmentation of the Pushyabhuti dynasty. And so furthermore, though, however, going back to the religion, although those such as Harsha promoted Buddhism, Hinduism was still the dominant religion before, so it must be noted. So as for the life of Harsha Vardhana specifically, so the most important leader, at least that we have documented, of the empire of Harsha, or the Pushyabhuti dynasty, but often just called the Harsha Empire, often, for example, the Alexandrian Empire, could be considered the Macedonian Empire, but often people consider it his own creation, even though Philip II was, his father, was quite successful himself. But nonetheless, they often call it the Harsha Empire, as they often call Alexander's empire, the Alexandrian Empire. So therefore, we will seek, because of his significance in this empire, to find a biography of his life and key details into, as well, into the rise and fall of this empire, or the fall that necessarily coincided with it, his death. So Shah Vardhana, carrying the suffix, the royal suffix, was a Pushyabhuti emperor who ruled northern India from 606 to 647 CE. He was the son of Prabhakaravardhana, who had defeated the Alkan Hun invaders, and the younger brother of Rajyavardhana, a king of Thanissar, present-day Haryana. So, important and royal family. So as for his early life and ascension, from circa 590 CE, likely his birth date, to 606, his ascension date, CE, Common Era. So as for his birth and lineage, a little bit more detail. Harsha Vardhana was born in 590 CE, as mentioned, in Thanissar, in the present-day state of Haryana, India. I've been to Rajasthan and Udaipur in India, but not to this region. But I'd like to go. It's a beautiful country and so much history that I'm fascinated in. And he belonged to the Pushyabhuti Dynasty, the ruling family in the region. As for his youth and education, Harsha grew up in a political environment, witnessing the dynamics of regional power. He received a well-rounded education, gaining knowledge in statecraft, literature, and the arts. I might add that because he's from the royal family, he necessarily probably had the best education, although he might have been subjected to periods of isolation, perhaps, based on his sort of differences from the common people. As for his ascension to the throne in 606 CE, Harsha ascended to the throne of Thanissar after the assassination of his brother Rajyavardhana. This marked the beginning of Harsha's rule and his ambitions to rule his kingdom, or to expand his kingdom. So, he did come from the royal family, but he wasn't heir to the throne. It was actually his brother, and his brother was assassinated. Likely, it was Harsha who assassinated him. That's not certain, but sort of, I guess if the rumor's strong enough, perhaps it's more likely true than not, but maybe somebody else assassinated him. But in some way, maybe he definitely had the most to gain from this assassination, it would appear. So, after he ascended to the throne in 606 CE, Common Era, his military campaigns and ascension, up to 630 CE. As for his early challenges, Harsha faced challenges consolidating power in the aftermath of his brother's death. He successfully navigated political intrigues and internal conflicts to stabilize his reign. So despite the assassination, he managed to stabilize things, and despite sort of the disorder that followed in suit. As for his military campaigns, Harsha embarked on military campaigns to expand the empire. His conquests extended the realms of Thanissar to include territories in present-day Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar, culminating in a very large empire. As for further, as mentioned previously, his diplomacy and alliances, Harsha was known for his diplomatic skills, establishing friendly relations with neighboring states through alliances and treaties. His ability to maintain peace and stability contributed to the prosperity of the empire. So maybe contributed to the assassination of his brother, and maybe quite warlike as well, conquering neighboring regions, but maybe he was also good at diplomacy as well. Or maybe it was through necessity. Maybe those he engaged in diplomatic relations were those he could not necessarily conquer. As for his cultural and religious patronage, from circa 630 to his death in 647 CE, as for his Buddhist patronage, despite having a dominant Hinduism religion in the region, Harsha was a devout Buddhist and played a pivotal role in the promoting Buddhism. He convened the famous Buddhist assembly in Kannauj in 643 CE, which brought together scholars, monks, and dignitaries from various parts of the world. So quite a global individual he was, at least the globe that they had access to, but also under the guise of religion, under the guise of Buddhism too. So showing twofold, both his global connections, but also his promotion of Buddhism, and just generally bringing together in his patronage of religion. As for his support of the arts, Harsha was a patron of the arts and literature as well. The Chinese traveler Xuanzang, that's Xuanzang, who visited his court, praised Harsha for his encouragement of learning and the flourishing of culture during his reign. Hence it was the zenith not only of geographical extent, but also the zenith in terms of art and literature and religion within the Pushyabhuti dynasty. As for his administrative reforms, Harsha implemented administrative reforms to improve governance. His administration was characterized by a sense of justice, and he took measures to address the welfare of his subjects. So also good with his internal policies as well in terms of statecraft. As for the zenith of power and further on the Kannauj assembly, circa 630 to 640 CE, starting with political influence, Harsha's empire reaches zenith during this period. Northern India experienced relative political stability under his rule, and the emperor became a significant power in the Indian subcontinent. And further on the Kannauj assembly, the Grand Assembly, organized by Harsha in Kannauj in 643 CE, showcased his political influence and commitments to fostering cultural and religious exchange. Shuang Shang, detailed accounts provide invaluable insights into this historical event. So quite almost a diplomat himself, sort of bringing in people from other regions to learn from and to share knowledge, which is quite, I think, high-minded of him. But as for his decline and legacy, circa 647 CE, as with succession issues, so Harsha, as mentioned previously, died in 647 CE without a clear heir, leading to internal strife and power struggles within the empire. So for all that he accomplished, he wasn't able to determine a clear heir, which is maybe one of the most important things of a monarch. As for his invasions and fragmentation that followed, the weakened empire faced invasions from external forces, including Chalukyas from the south and Arab invaders from the northwest. These invasions, coupled with internal conflicts, contributed to the decline and fragmentation of Harsha's empire. As for his legacy, despite the eventual decline of the empire, Harsha Vardhana left a lasting legacy in Indian history. His patronage of Buddhism, promotion of culture and learning, and efforts to foster diplomatic ties significantly influenced the socio-cultural fabric of northern India during the 7th century. Harsha remains a key figure in the history of Indian medieval dynasties, and he's remembered for his contributions to religion, culture, and governance. So very, very famous, very significant leader, and even perhaps the Pushyabhuti Dynasty should properly be called the Empire of Harsha. But as the caveat was that he wasn't able to determine a clear heir, or the heir wasn't clear, so maybe it was an impossible problem to solve, or maybe it was a problem he neglected. But it's impossible to tell today, or at least I am not able to determine that. But I'd be curious if anyone might have any thoughts on that. So in terms of the content of the slide, so title we have Harsha and the Pushyabhuti Dynasty, also known as the Vardhana Dynasty, and also known as the Empire of Harsha. And it was a ruling dynasty in northern India in the 6th and 7th centuries CE. The significant leader was Harsha Vardhana himself. The empire was the Pushyabhuti Dynasty. The period was circa 500 to 647 CE. Modern locations was in India. Million square kilometers, 1.00, which is very large, or one of the larger states. Maybe, I would even say maybe middle size. But nonetheless, we've had covered greater, as the next empire we'll cover is significantly larger, but some have been significantly smaller, like the famed empire city-states of ancient Greece, although everyone probably knows of Sparta and Athens. They were a fraction. They were not even 0.1%. So this is much more significant. And also to compare with some other empires, many of the nomadic empires that we covered had huge areas of land, but they weren't settled there necessarily. So this is a huge sedentary piece of land. So it also must be recognized for that. That's the equivalent of 0.39 million square miles. Percent of the world is 0.74%, excluding Antarctica. Once again, it must be noted that this region is a populated area, so necessarily maybe harder to conquer or rule over than maybe some of the more nomadic empires. As for the capital city was Stanvishvara, which is modern-day Thanisar, and Kanyakuja, which is in modern-day Kannauj, where they had the famous Kannauj assembly many years previously. The government was a monarchy, had a hereditary lineage. The common languages was Sanskrit, which was the common language in literature, administration, and religious texts. As well, Prakrit languages were also frequently used amongst many of the peoples. Religion, Hinduism was dominant, however Buddhism was also prominent, particularly under Harsha's rule, and Jainism, also one of the older religions, even predates Buddhism, and we've covered one of the Tirthakaras in my History of Leaders of Thought series, which I'm grateful if you've checked out, and I'd be grateful if you do. Population was likely in the tens of millions, so perhaps Canada's 36 million, that's where I'm from. The United States is about 360 million, so maybe approximately the size of Canada today in terms of population, maybe bigger, maybe smaller, but unlikely over 100 million, so unlikely much larger, but still compared to India today, over 1 billion people, it now has the most populated country in the world as of 2024. I just lost 10 years. The population is significantly smaller, so maybe the population was larger. If the same region were to be controlled today, it would be much, much larger, but maybe also because of agriculture and technology, they could not support a population much larger. But nonetheless, the estimate I came across was tens of millions. In the top left, we have a coin of Harsha Vardhana, circa 606 to 647 CE. To the right of that, we have the lion capital on its original pillar near Teli Kamandir, Gwalior Fort, a very beautiful vertical structure. To the right of that, we have a female bust found in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. So sort of image of what the beauty standards might have looked like at the time. Beautiful headdress, necklace, etc. Brought down, and to the left of that, we have the seal of Harsha Vardhana found in Nalanda. Unfortunately, it is cracked, but nonetheless, it's remarkable that we can still have his seal. For some additional information, list of Pushyabhuti Dynasty rulers. Pushyabhuti reigned circa 500 CE, but little is known about him. Naravardhana, 500 to 525 CE, he reigned. Rajyavardhana I reigned from 525 to 555 CE. Adityavardhana, 555 to 580 CE. Prabhakaravardhana reigned from 580 to 605 CE. Rajyavardhana II reigned from 605 to 606 CE, and Harshavardhana, the most famous, 606 to 647 CE, with the collapse or the fragmentation of the Pushyabhuti dynasty following after. It was preceded by the Gupta Empire, which we have covered, and it was also preceded by the Gauda Kingdom and the Makhari dynasty, and later the Gupta dynasty as well. And it was succeeded by the Varman dynasty of Kannauj and the Chalukya dynasty. So many of these empires we've covered indirectly or directly, and the succeeding ones will also make more sense as we cover further ancient Indian history. And there'll be many more to come, so I promise that. And in the top right, we have the map of the region where they ruled over. So they have the Sasanian Empire, very formidable, which we've covered before, very close by. They have the Tibetan Empire to the north, but nonetheless, they really conquered a very massive area in northeastern, but also considered northwestern ancient India as well. So that is Harsha and the Pushyabhuti dynasty, and we will discuss the leader more in comparison after covering the next empire and next leader. So this is a very, very important one, perhaps the largest we've even covered so far. So the Rashidun Caliphate, So the Rashidun Caliphate, established after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, was the first caliphate in Islamic history. It was characterized by the leadership of the rightly guided caliphs, or Rashidun, who were companions of the Prophet, known for their close associations with him. So Rashidun necessarily are these people who were close to Prophet Muhammad, or caliphates. Therefore, we will seek once again to follow the history of its rise and fall, to perhaps learn more, to have takeaways today. How might our modern states rise and fall? So the Rashidun Caliphate, some further background, was the first caliphate to succeed the Islamic prophet Muhammad, as mentioned. It was ruled by the first four successive caliphs of Muhammad after his death in 632 CE, or 11 in AH in the Islamic calendar. During its existence, the empire was the most powerful economic, cultural, and military force in West Asia and Northeast Africa. So not only was it absolutely massive, the largest empire we've covered so far, but it was also the most powerful economic, cultural, and military force in its region. So as for the rise of the Rashidun Caliphate from 632 to 661 CE, starting with the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE. So after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, a leadership vacuum emerged. His close companions gathered at Saqifa to select a successor. Abu Bakr, the Prophet's father-in-law and senior companion, was chosen as the first caliph. It's interesting to me that he was the first, that he is older than Prophet Muhammad. I thought that was an interesting takeaway. When I first envisioned it, I thought it would have been like a nephew or son or something like that, but it was his father-in-law, so somebody his senior, at least in age, but still one of the most famous people in Islamic history, not quite as famous as Muhammad himself. As for the Rida Wars, 632 to 633 CE that followed, the Caliphate faced challenges in the form of the Rida Wars, R-I-D-D-A, wars, where, not to be confused with the city, Rida, which ends with an H, where some Arabian tribes refused to pay zakat, which was a charitable tax, after the Prophet's death. Abu Bakr, with military campaigns, led the commanders like Khalid ibn al-Walid, successfully suppressed these rebellions and restored unities. So after any sort of power gap we see, there's sort of people not wanting to pay their charitable taxes or not wanting to follow the new authority, but Abu Bakr, through military campaigns, put them to rest, or at least caused them to cause them to pay the tax at least, and cause them to be subordinate to the state under the Rida Wars. As for the conquest of Persia and the Byzantine territories, under the leadership of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, who reigned from 634 to 644 CE, the Rashidun Caliphate embarked on an extraordinary series of military conquests. The Byzantine and Sasanian Persian empires were defeated. So we've covered both the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and we've also covered the Sasanian Persian Empire, leading to the annexation of vast territories, hence this is the largest empire we've covered so far, including Iraq, previously named as, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Persia. As for the assassination of Caliph Umar and the appointment of Caliph Uthman, Caliph Umar was assassinated in 644 CE, and the next caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, faced internal discontent and challenges his successor. Despite contributing to the compilation of the Quran, very important literature achievement, his caliphate was marred with opposition from various quarters, leading to his assassination in 656 CE. So it's interesting to note that the Quran was compiled later under Uthman, not necessarily during the life of Muhammad or Abu Bakr, for that matter. But despite the great involvement he had in Islam by being the caliph, but also compiling the Quran, or contributing to the compiling of the Quran, he was still, like his predecessor, Umar, assassinated. As for Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib, who reigned from 656 to 661 CE, Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad, so his junior, became the fourth caliph. His caliphate faced significant challenges, including the first fitna, which existed from 656 to 661 CE, which was a civil war arising from the assassination of Uthman and disputes over his succession. So Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib was subjected to these civil wars because it wasn't certain that he should have been the leader after the assassination of Uthman. So as for the fall of the Rashidun Caliphate, so he was the last of the caliphs, and the emergence of the Umayyad Caliphate in 661 CE. Starting with the Battle of Siffin in 657 CE, the rivalry between Ali and Muawiyah, the governor of Syria, escalated into the Battle of Siffin. Siffin. The inconclusive outcome led to internal strife within the Muslim community. So once again, always external forces, but also necessarily internal forces as well. As for the emergence of the Kharijites, who, dissatisfied with the arbitration at Siffin, a faction known as the Kharijites emerged, opposing both Ali and Muawiyah. The Kharijites later responsible for the assassination of Ali in 661 CE. So now we have three groups here. We have those following Ali, those following Muawiyah, and those following from the Kharijites as well, who would later assassinate Ali himself. And that's Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was the last caliph. As for the caliphate of Hassan ibn Ali and abdication, after the death of Ali, his son Hassan briefly assumed the caliphate but abdicated in favor of Muawiyah, leading to the establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate in 661. So after Ali, his son did briefly rule. However, he sort of stepped away in favor of Muawiyah, who formed the Umayyad Caliphate, which we will cover soon. So thus, that was the collapse of the Rashidun Caliphate, largely due to more predominantly internal factors rather than external factors. As for the legacy, the Rashidun Caliphate is remembered as a period of rapid expansion and consolidation of Muslim rule. The leadership of the rightly guarded caliphs laid the foundation for the early Islamic state, and their examples continue to hold significance in Islamic history. While the Rashidun Caliphate witnessed remarkable military successes, its later years were marked by internal strife and political challenges that eventually contributed to its transformation into the Umayyad Caliphate, which we will cover. So very, very important empire for religious history, but also history of the world. It's maybe the largest empire we've covered also so far. So as for this significant leader we'll be highlighting, that's Caliph Abu Bakr himself. So the Rashidun Caliphate, which means the rightly guarded caliphate, was led by 4 caliphs who were close companions of Prophet Muhammad. The most important ruler of the Rashidun Caliphate was Caliph Abu Bakr, perhaps because he founded it, the first in line of the rightly guarded caliphs. Therefore, we seek to find a biography of his life. So, a little bit more background information. Abu Bakr, also known as Adb Allah ibn Abi Kuhafa, I believe I pronounced that right. My apologies if I did not. I'm trying my best and trying to also make it accessible to other non-native speakers. He was the senior companion and was, through his daughter Aisha, father-in-law to the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and as well as the Caliph of the Rashidun Caliphate. He is known with the honorific title Al-Sadiq by Sunni Muslims. So very, very important leader, but it's interesting to me that he was older than Muhammad and necessarily his successor of this caliphate. So maybe that speaks to the abilities of Muhammad or the humility of Abu Bakr. So as for his early life and conversion, from 573 to 632 CE, his birth and name, Abu Bakr, whose full name was Abdullah ibn Abi Kuhafa, was born in Mecca in 573 CE, the famous city of Mecca, perhaps the most important city in Islam, at least today, and likely at that time too. Well, at the time of the Rashidun Caliphate. He belonged to the tribe of Quraysh and the clan of Banu Taym. As for his business and reputation, Abu Bakr was a successful merchant known for his honesty, integrity, and business acumen. His reputation earned him the title Al-Sadiq, meaning the truthful or the honest, by Sunni Muslims. His early conversion to Islam, Abu Bakr was one of the earliest to convert to Islam. He embraced the faith in the early years of Prophet Muhammad's mission, demonstrating unwavering support during times of persecution. Be interested, I believe he already supported Muhammad before his daughter married him, but I wonder if he still would have supported Muhammad to the same extent if his daughter had not married him. But my guess is maybe that he admired Muhammad so much that he was proud to have his daughter marry him, but that's just my guess. I've started the Quran, but I admittedly have not finished it, but I will and endeavor to do such, provided I live long enough. As for the role in migration to Medina in 622 CE, as for the migration, also known as Hijrah, in 622 CE, when the persecution of Muslims in Mecca intensified, Prophet Muhammad and his companions, including Abu Bakr, undertook the Hijrah, known as migration, to Medina. Abu Bakr accompanied the Prophet on this perilous journey, so definitely earning each other's respect. I will say simultaneously that he went with Prophet Muhammad despite the latter's persecution. As for becoming a close companion of Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr maintained a close and intimate companionship with Prophet Muhammad, being his father-in-law for one reason. He was often the Prophet's side during key events, including battles and diplomatic negotiations, maybe even like a mentor, being the elder too in some ways. But as for his caliphate and leadership from 632 to 634 CE, as for his selection as caliph, after Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE, a meeting took place in Saqifa to determine the successor, or caliph. Abu Bakr was chosen as the first caliph by the consensus of the community. His acceptance speech emphasized the need for unity and guidance through the Quran and the traditions of Prophet Muhammad. So he was democratically elected, or consent. It was at least through consensus through that community, not necessarily entirely democratic. As for the Ridda Wars, as previously mentioned, the early years of Abu Bakr's caliphate saw the consolidation of Muslim rule and the suppression of rebellions during the Ridda Wars. He effectively dealt with tribes that had renounced Islam after the Prophet's death, ensuring unity of the nascent Islamic State. So those that started to sort of move away from Islam, he sort of brought back into the fold. As for the conquest of Persia and the Byzantine territories, under Abu Bakr's leadership, Muslim armies led by commanders like Khalid ibn al-Walid engaged in military campaigns against Byzantine and Sasanian Persian empires. The conquest included regions such as Iraq, Syria, and Persia. So not only creating unity, but also able to engage in conquests, necessarily making it an empire. As for his death and legacy, in 634 CE, so it's important to note he only reigned for 2 years and still had a lasting impact, but much of his importance in life also was before 632, the establishment of the Caliphate, with his relationship with Prophet Muhammad. So as for his death and legacy, death in 634 CE, Common Era, the death of Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr's caliphate was relatively short, but marked by significant achievements. He ruled for approximately 2 years and passed away in 634 CE. Before his death, however, he nominated Umar ibn al-Khattab as his successor. As for his legacy, Abu Bakr is remembered as a caliph who played a crucial role in maintaining the unity of the Muslim community during a critical period. If he never existed, maybe the caliph never might have existed, and maybe Islam never would have spread as it has. His leadership set the precedent for the rightly guided to build maybe analogy. He was the first to receive the baton. So, but if no one was there, maybe I think somebody else would have been there, but maybe they wouldn't have been able to do it as well as he did. His leadership set the precedent for the rightly guarded caliphs too, so setting the benchmark for what a caliph should do, not only within the Rashidun Caliphate, but also in succeeding caliphates as well. His close association with Prophet Muhammad and his contributions to the early Islamic State earned him enduring respect among Muslims, and he is often referred to as one of the greatest companions of the Prophet, maybe even the greatest. And it must also be noted, perhaps, that maybe some of Prophet Muhammad's greatness might have in some ways been influenced by his experience with his father-in-law, Abu Bakr. So father-in-law, but also successor, so both sides, very fascinating. So, as for the content of the slide, so the title, we have Abu Bakr and the Rashidun Caliphate. It was the first caliphate to succeed Islamic prophet Muhammad. At its time, it was the most powerful economic, cultural, and military force in West Asia and Northeast Africa. Significant leader was Caliph Abu Bakr. Empire was the Rashidun Caliphate. The period was from 632 to 661 CE, Common Era. Modern locations included Saudi Arabia, which was the birthplace and early center of the Rashidun Caliphate, but also Islam more broadly. Iraq, Syria, Iran, previously known as Persia, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and Kuwait. Million square kilometers, 6.40, the largest we've covered so far, nominally. Some might have been larger, but as according to my source, this is the largest we've covered so far. Million square kilometers would be 2.47% of the world, 4.75%. That's excluding Antarctica, but it's almost 5%, very massive region, or almost 1/20th of the entire world. And also must be mentioned, these are populated regions that it was able to rule over, so not necessarily some isolated or some region where it would be easy to rule over. They were all relatively educated, and there were many people in these regions. So the capital was Medina from 632 to 656 CE, and Kufa from 656 to 661 CE. Government was a caliphate. Common languages was Arabic and various local dialects, because they ruled over many different peoples. Religion was Islam, or they had many different peoples following them. Religion was Islam, necessarily. Population was tens to over 100 million, so also one of the largest in terms of population that we've covered so far. None have, maybe the total population of the region might certainly be much larger today, but given the time period, it's very large in comparison to many of the other empires we'd cover, very, very large, and relatively a more sedentary empire too. So it wasn't so just large in terms of geography and large in terms of people, and it was necessary because perhaps the vision of sort of a unified by religion, which isn't sufficient, but maybe certainly helpful. So in terms of images, in the top left, we have the calligraphic seal featuring Abu Bakr's name on display in the Hagia Sophia famous place. I believe in Turkey. I believe Hagia Sophia is in Turkey, but my apologies if that's not correct. To the right of that, we have Al-Masjid and Nabawi at Medina, the empire's first capital. So pardon me, the image is small, but we can sort of see what Medina looks like today, featuring some of sort of the old style, and some of those buildings are still there that might have existed during the Rashidun Caliphate. To the right of that, we have the Great Mosque of Kufa, the empire's second capital in Iraq. Below that, and to the right, we have an image of Muhammad's widow, Aisha, daughter of Abu Bakr, battling fourth Caliph Ali at the Battle of the Camel in the mid-16th century miniature from Siyar-e-Nebi. To the right of that, we have a coin of the Rashidun Caliphate imitating the Sassanid Empire ruler Khosrau II, type in produced in 656 CE. So it's interesting that their coins were styled after the Sasanian Empire. So none of these empires are completely independent. So their coins, they copied a bit of the Sasanian Empire, and we'll see another empire as well. Below that, we have the tombstone of the caliphs Abu Bakr and Umar on the left and right, the first two caliphs of the Rashidun Caliphate. So at least their tombs one can still visit today. Down and to the left of that, we have a coin of the Rashidun Caliphate, circa 647 to 670 CE, imitating a Byzantine coin featuring the Byzantine figure Constans holding a scepter and glorious cruciger. So the Sasanians, they copied their coins to some extent, but they also copied the Byzantine coins to some extent. They were even had conquests in Byzantium, for example, so maybe that's where they learned of other coins. But nonetheless, there is significant, certainly significant, and maybe to the greatest extent, greatest proportion, originality within the empire. But I want to emphasize that there are still influences from other empires, such as the Sasanian and the Byzantine Empire, if not only just on their coins. As for additional information, so the government was a caliphate. The caliphs, in order, were from 632 to 634 CE was Abu Bakr, the first caliph of the Rashidun Caliphate. The second was Umar, who reigned from 634 to 644 CE, 10 years. Then there was Uthman, Caliph Uthman, who reigned from 644 to 656 CE, 12 years, even larger. And then Ali, the last of this caliphate, before the next caliphate after his son stepped aside to the next caliphate. Ali reigned from 656 to 661 CE. It was preceded by Islamic Medina, the Byzantine Empire, the Sasanian Empire, and the Ghassanids. We've covered explicitly the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Empire, but we've also discussed the other two, sort of indirectly in other episodes as well. And it was succeeded by the Umayyad Caliphate, which is the next caliphate, which we will cover. The history, succession to Muhammad was in 632 CE. Conquest of Persia was 633 to 654 CE. The ascension of Umar was 634 CE. The assassination of Umar and ascension of Uthman was 644 CE. The assassination of Uthman and the ascension of Ali was 656 CE. And the assassination of Ali was 661 CE. And the first fitna, or the internal conflict, ends after Hassan's abdication in 661 CE as well, transferring over the rule to the Umayyad Caliphate. And in the top right, we have a map showing the absolute massive region, the continents of Africa and Asia, or the Middle East, we can say, and even up into perhaps even parts of Europe even as well. But a massive 6.4 million square kilometers. I cannot emphasize how large that is, especially for the time. Or maybe I caveat that, maybe not especially for the time, just generally, just a very massive empire, and in terms of people too. So that is Abu Bakr and the Rashidun Caliphate, and now in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will have a comparison between the two leaders to hopefully distill a couple more takeaways about the two respective empires and the two respective leaders. So, Harsha, Vardhana, and of the Pushyabhuti Dynasty, and Caliph Abu Bakr of the Rashidun Caliphate were significant historical figures who played pivotal roles in their regions they governed during their respective times. While they lived in different cultural and religious contexts, there were some notable points of comparison between these two leaders that we will highlight. As for their time period and historical context, Harsha Vardhana lived in the 7th century CE and was ruled in ancient India. His reign marked a time of political and cultural development in northern India. Caliph Abu Bakr lived in the 7th century CE as well, immediately following the death of Prophet Muhammad. He was the first caliph of the Rashidun Caliphate and led to a period of rapid expansion of Islam. So I guess we could say they both sort of had some sort of royal lineage, we can call it. Harsha was from the Vardhana dynasty, but his brother had to be assassinated before he came to this throne. Maybe his brother would have eventually died naturally and he would have got the throne eventually, but nonetheless he received the throne early. So although he had perhaps the most powerful lineage, there was a significant barrier that ultimately was removed. As for Abu Bakr, he was not the son of Prophet Muhammad, so it wasn't necessarily hereditary. He was not the brother, he was the father-in-law. Aisha, Prophet Muhammad's wife's father, was Abu Bakr. So some royal lineage, probably one of the most significant, especially after Muhammad died, but not necessarily directly connected by blood, so also perhaps a barrier. Both of which these two individuals overcame in different ways. As for their religious affiliation, Harsha Vardhana was a devout Buddhist and played a significant role in promoting Buddhism. It must be noted that Hinduism was the dominant religion, so sort of going against the grain. He organized the famous Buddhist assembly at Kannauj, showcasing his commitment to the religion. So sort of certainly focused on religion, but sort of maybe going against the dominant religion, and doing it on a grand scale, so very significant. And maybe, as we shall see, we'll cover it. Caliph Abu Bakr was a close companion of Prophet Muhammad and played a crucial role in the early Islamic community. As Caliph, he upheld and propagated Islam. So both of them were, in compared to almost all other leaders, very focused on religion. However, Harsha sort of changed the momentum from Hinduism towards Buddhism, although his empire would sort of fragment after him, whereas Abu Bakr continued the religion of Prophet Muhammad. But there might be a caveat that to some extent some of Prophet Muhammad's philosophy might have come, maybe perhaps through the influence of Abu Bakr. Certainly it definitely under the religion comes from God, but maybe Abu Bakr might have had some significant influence on the way Prophet Muhammad lived and interpreted himself. So perhaps maybe Abu Bakr might have some metaphysical impact as well. As for their leadership and governance, Harsha Vardhana's leadership was characterized by diplomatic skills and military campaigns that expanded his empire, reaching its zenith. He was known for his administrative reforms and patronage of the arts and literature. So sort of jack of all trades. He was successful in both conquering but also diplomacy. He was also great in the arts and religion and literature as well. As for Caliph Abu Bakr, his leadership was marked by consolidating the Islamic State after the death of Prophet Muhammad. So it's necessarily a great state builder, being the first caliph, whereas Harsha was the last of his empire. And Abu Bakr faced internal challenges, including the Ridda Wars, a civil war, and initiated military campaigns to secure and expand the territories of the caliphate. So he formally formed the first caliphate, so certainly we can call him a conqueror, perhaps, or a empire builder himself, as Harsha was himself. Maybe one of the differences, we'll get there maybe in succession and legacy, but Harsha was not able to have a clear heir, whereas Abu Bakr did have a clear heir. Nonetheless, clear heir and clear heirs were assassinated, but nonetheless, maybe a little bit more clear succession planning. As for further detail on their military achievements, Harsha Vardhana emerged in military campaigns to engaged in military campaigns to expand his empire. Although the details of specific battles are not extensively recorded, his empire encompassed significant parts of northern India, reaching 1 million square kilometers. As for Caliph Abu Bakr played a crucial role in the Muslim conquest, particularly during the Ridda Wars and the expansion into Persia and Byzantine empires. It's not necessarily certain that it was under his rule that it reached its largest geographical extent, but to hit 6.4 million square miles, he must have certainly amalgamated many large regions, perhaps both through warfare and diplomacy. So perhaps they're both similar in that regard. So as for maybe one of the key differences, their succession and legacy, and the last one we will highlight. So Harsha Vardhana's death led to a power vacuum, and his power eventually fragmented. So I would say it's great to be the zenith of an empire, but because you're the zenith, your heir necessarily does not surpass you, so it's also not necessarily a good thing. Despite this, his legacy is remembered for his contributions to Buddhism and the cultural development of northern India, and hence the empire is even called the Harsha Empire, maybe even before it could not even been qualified as an empire, according to certain scholars. As for Caliph Abu Bakr's caliphate was relatively short-lived. He only ruled for 2 years, but he successfully navigated challenges, including the Ridda Wars, and his nomination of Umar as his successor set the precedent for the rightly guided caliphs, so perhaps better succession planning, and he is highly regarded in Islamic history for his steadfast leadership. But so maybe he was more successful by having Umar, but Umar was actually assassinated anyways, so, and it only lasted 4 caliphs before the next, but they reigned, some of them for quite long periods, Umar for 10 years, for example. So thus, Harsha Vardhana and Caliph Abu Bakr were influential leaders in their respective regions during a similar period in history, although, as far as I know, they never met or interacted directly. While their religious affiliations and cultural contexts differed, both leaders faced challenges in governance and made lasting contributions to the political and religious landscapes of their times and respective empires. So 2 very, very fascinating leaders and 2 very fascinating empires. I'm very grateful for your watching and or listening to this. My name is Caliph Ashcroft, and this is CashcroftTV, and I'd be very grateful if you continue to support. Thank you so much.